Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, the 2025 DDoS Threat Landscape. I'm Sadiat Jimmer, and I'll be your host for this session. I'm delighted to be joined by Teresa Carlin from Corero, a recognized leader in cybersecurity and DDoS protection. Teresa brings deep insights into the evolving threat landscape and the critical strategies organizations need to stay resilient. In today's session, Teresa will guide us through the major developments we've seen so far in 2025. What's new? What's changing? Teresa, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. And thank you so much for joining.
Well, thanks, Adia. That's such a great introduction. It's a real pleasure, especially when there's just so much ground to cover. We're really seeing the DDoS landscape evolving. I'd like to share some insights with everyone today.
Great. To kick things off, what would you say is the primary force behind the recent headlines? What's the most notable shift we're witnessing in the DDoS landscape?
Yeah, so spending some time looking through cybersecurity news this year, the obvious takeaway for me is the huge jump in attack volumes. There's lots of biggest attack ever stories, along with some articles focusing in on new botnet variants. Often though, these articles, they don't really deep dive into too much detail around the specific characteristics of each of the attacks. And it can make it feel like a lot of them are just written to create more content without really having too much more that's new to say.
That's a great insight. So what do you think is behind the growth in attack volume we were seeing today?
Yeah, so for me, looking at why that might be, there's really four focus areas which we can talk about. The first of these is around motive.
So, Teresa, do you believe that today's global instability is contributing to a rise in the likelihood or intensity of cyber warfare?
Oh yes, so definitely. I would say this plays a significant part. And along with traditional motives, just such as financial gain, motives really self-explanatory. The growth kind of goes without saying, really. But what is worth highlighting at this point is that just as defenders are starting to collaborate, for example, through ISACs and other online groups and tools to share their experiences and knowledge, attackers are doing the same thing. So they're sharing their resources to orchestrate these really complex attacks. And this is even happening at a state level. So, for instance, where the state might be encouraging or assisting hackers which are maybe more focused on financial gain.
So beyond motive, are there any other emerging trends or contributing factors that are accelerating this growth?
Yeah, so the other areas that we can talk about are technique innovation, widespread infection of devices, and greater accessibility of all of these new tools.
That's certainly concerning. How are DDoS attack techniques evolving in response to these changes?
So in more recent years, attack types have been pretty much consistent with just some small enhancements being made to existing tools like Mirai. But now we're seeing improvement. So perhaps code which was maybe not optimal, it might have had some broken code elements which hadn't been picked up on before, for example. But now every little part is being paid care and attention to, and these holes are being fixed. Also, where there might be randomization in the code to make it hard to mitigate that traffic, we've seen more loops being added, so it's even more hard to mitigate, but it's also making it harder to reverse engineer.
That's very interesting. The landscape is clearly, evolving rapidly, and so as attackers becomes more sophisticated, are we also seeing them adopt entirely new tool sets or even repurpose existing technology in surprising ways?
Yeah, so there's some newer independent suites of tools too, and attackers are even looking at specific devices that they can compromise, and then they're weaponizing the code that's inbuilt into them in the software that's running on those devices. Additionally, like easy to run scans of the internet make it really simple and fast to find these vulnerable devices which are available for anyone to compromise.
That's interesting. So, let's talk about artificial intelligence for a moment. It's developing so quickly, Do you think it's starting to play a role in how DDoS attacks are planned or executed?
That's a good question. With all the advancements of AI, it's just no doubt going to prove to be like an enabler of DDoS for dummies. These days, attackers are monitoring activity much more because they can make use of these like readily available tools. So they're measuring their own success, specifically the impact of each attack. AI is being used to monitor the impact in different ways, like using social media to monitor what victims and users are posting, but also keeping in the know about vendors. We can see that attackers have more knowledge of mitigation techniques and also which products are being used and how they operate. Added to that, DDoS for hire service developments are making it harder to track down and identify who the real attacker is.
Yes, we seem to focus on how vendors and the SOCs may use, AI to defend, but of course, AI is a tool that anybody can adopt,
Yeah.
So in recent years, have there been any specific categories of devices that are, more commonly exploited for DDoS activities?
Well, yeah. So although we're in the age of smart devices with literally everything having its own IP address, there's this vast lack of awareness out there as to the possibility and the impact of device compromise. There's still loads of really old devices and devices just running outdated software or with default usernames and passwords on them. So pointing to an article like, for example, published by Finances Online, the number of IoT devices has dramatically increased. So since 2015 to 2025, where we're at upwards of 75 billion now.
So let's take a step back. You mentioned that attackers are exploiting, a wider range of devices. Could you walk us through some examples that stand out?
Sure. Some examples of like well-known device compromises are like Mytel SIP phones and a few specific models of various like home routers. We also have MikroTik Router OS, which I'll talk about more later, and lots of CCTV, NVR, network video recorders, which, for example, are utilising the 1111 botnet.
Let's talk about accessibility of DDoS tools for a moment. How has the landscape changed in terms of how easily these tools can be accessed, and deployed? What's new and or different now compared to a few years ago, say?
Yeah, so DDoS for hire platforms are really thriving. It just makes it so easy for anyone to launch a DDoS. Some of these platforms are offering subscriptions. They're lower than even $10 a month. And worse than that, many now use affiliate models. So just like ransomware gangs, so not only are they easy to access, they're actively marketing and recruiting and growing. This is no longer like amateur hour. It's basically an underground software as a service business. They have various options of attack durations and intensities across so many different platforms and chat services. They're even like pricing set to specific target industries that you can choose from. The Corero threat research team actually published a blog article earlier this year about the Mastresi botnet. This was actually posted by the attacker in their own Telegram channel. It just serves like that's evidence that attackers are really paying attention, but just not only, just to their end targets.
That's an interesting, insight. But so given how complex and distributed these attacks have become, is accurate attribution still realistic? Or, is it now virtually impossible to identify the true source of an attack?
Yeah, so these services, they're cloaked behind encrypted messaging platforms with layered infrastructures and decentralized like payment models. So even if you're able to work out which botnet the traffic is originating from, attributing that to a specific threat actor has become like orders of magnitude harder. So defenders need to use all of the tools available to understand and prioritize their own PPTs.
So botnets, seems to be the driving force behind so many large-scale DDoS attacks. So what exactly are they, and what makes them so effective for attackers?
So to begin with, compromised devices are formed into these like massive botnets, which are then controlled centrally. So they have command and control servers sending commands to the bots to tell them like who to attack, when, and which attacks they want to run. So if you like, we can run through a quick overview of some of these better known botnet variants that you might have heard of.
That would be perfect. A high level, overview would be really helpful, especially to highlight how these variants, differ in behavior or scale.
Okay, so first of all, we have Mirai, for which the code was exposed back in 2016. Since then, attackers have like reused the code to create loads of different variants. For example, the first one I'd go through is GorillaBot. So GorillaBot was identified by NS Focus back in September 2024. GorillaBot uses an RPC vulnerability to gain privileges. And it also has like anti-honeypot measures built in, so it's looking for security traps. Another example would be 1111 bot. So there's been a lot of reports on this one since March this year. For instance, in cybersecurity news, Bleeping Computer reported on it, and actually Grey Noise published a list of IPs linked to this botnet. This one primarily uses NVRs and security cameras, and it stands out for its like scanning on telnet and SSH ports, after which it has brute force attacks using credential dictionaries. Another example is Aquabot. So this was first known about back in 2023, but Akamai Cert have reported on a new iteration in January this year, and they've actually named it Aquabot 3. So it's specific to certain Mitel SIP phone series, and it exploits a command injection vulnerability. Notably, it has a report kill function, apparently to kill the signal back to the command and control, so it's done for concealment. This one's advertised as DDoS as a service on Telegram, and it comes under different names such as Cursing Firewall, the iServices, or the iBotnet.
To be interesting to know, beyond Mirai and its variants, are there any other, noteworthy botnet frameworks or tool sets that attackers are using more frequently now?
Yeah, so we have Masjesu, for instance, which was first seen towards 2023. It appears to have been independently developed because it's continuously maintained and updated. This one employs primarily IoTs, mostly cameras and routers, such as Netgear, D-Link, and TP-Link. The Corero threat research team published an article which is available on our website a few months ago, and it goes into some details surrounding the attack methods provided. And as we've mentioned earlier, since the article was reposted in the Telegram channel, it's advertised as DDoS for hire. In 2002, MikroTik developed Router OS, which is a routing platform aimed at being like easily deployed. According to Shodan, a lot of systems are running really outdated versions of this, and this software, it has an inbuilt traffic generator. The purpose of the traffic generator was to be used for stress testing networks and analysing performance, but unfortunately, like this is being made use of. They're putting their own templates in order to launch attacks. We really see this a lot. It's being used all the time. For example, like in a lot of gaming attacks. Again, we have a blog article from last March on the Corero website, which goes through like how the traffic generator works. Finally, in botnet examples, we've got RapperBot. So there's been various reports written about Rapperbot since June 2022, and there's a really good one that Fortinet have written. It's interesting since early versions of the bot's code actually contain a link to a YouTube rap music video, and that's where it actually got its name from. So this is also a Mirai variant, but I just wanted to highlight it because we've seen some really huge attacks from it.
It's interesting to know that there are different, types of botnets out there. But is it possible to figure out which botnets actually launched a given DDoS attack?
It's a really good question. From the attack alone, it's often really difficult, if not impossible, to know because the attack vectors are really similar across the board.
So in your own perspective, what would you say are the most prominent, DDoS attack methods we're seeing right now?
Yeah, so firstly, just touching a little on quick reflection and other like layer 7 attacks. The challenge for security teams in general is that with encryption being deployed more heavily just through our standard everyday protocols, which obviously like makes things more secure, but the side effect of that is it makes it much harder to distinguish what's bad because we won't always have visibility into that. This is a focus area and undoubtedly one where I think we'll be seeing developments in terms of new features going forwards.
Good. Let's talk about the DDoS events on headlines. Which specific attack vector are responsible for this, record-breaking DDoS events we keep seeing in the headlines?
Yeah, so there's a few really. TCP SYNAC vectors have been ramping up for over a year now. So although this vector is by no means new, the volumes we've been seeing are new and they're continuing to grow with the level and types of reflector being more impactful than like previously seen. So there's two main challenges here. The first is around performance with PPS levels potentially causing end device CPU to be overwhelmed. And the second is trying to mitigate only the malicious traffic. We've seen these attacks last for up to weeks. And since the sources are like often CDNs or cloud providers that are being used as reflectors, it presents a real significant challenge.
That's an interesting insight. So what other, attack vectors are we seeing at these significant levels?
Again, attackers don't often need to reinvent the wheel. Like they can usually make use of what's already available with some small tweaks and with all the other things we've discussed here. So we're seeing increases in UDP floods similar to the TCP SYNAC vector in terms of them being small packet size, but also floods of very large UDP packets with a randomized payload of just garbage and other spread packet characteristics. In lots of instances, the victims are like ISPs with traffic hitting entire subnets at a time and from like thousands of source IPs. So we've seen like Rapperbot specifically has been generating these attacks. Cloudflare recently published an article describing a similar attack. These are often like really short bursts as well, maybe only lasting 45 seconds, and it demonstrates the need to be able to react instantaneously.
So the Corero 2024 trend report notes that, customers were experiencing an average of 11 DDoS attacks per day. What insight should we, take away from this statistic?
Yeah, so today's attacks are much more tactical. Automation and lower cost infrastructure are being weaponized in order to keep our defenses active and overwhelmed or desensitized. Often like these high frequency attacks, they're very short and they don't saturate links. So it's really easy to kind of just dismiss that as being background noise. But this activity does serve like a key purpose, which is basically to distract us from more targeted activities.
So when you say attacks are more, more tactical today, what specific change in strategy or execution are you seeing?
Yeah, attackers are now like testing your defenses in real time. They'll probe like your mitigation thresholds and they'll launch short bursts to distract security teams and exploit any like delays in response. It's not just a flood, it's a smart campaign now. Attackers will keep sending like different attacks in short succession until they succeed. That's why you need automation, you need visibility and fast feedback loops in your defensive stack.
To add to what you've just, discussed, and before we wrap up, what's the key message or takeaway you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Yeah, so really it's this: the accessibility, the volume, the sophistication of DDoS threats are changing the game now. Like if you're in security or service delivery or customer onboarding, you really need to think about what your assumptions have been. There's no more like low risk profile. Everything is now high risk.
That's great. Teresa, thank you very much for your powerful insight today. Your expertise has truly, helped demystify the complexity of the modern DDoS threats landscape. And to everyone who joined us, thank you for being part of this critical conversation. If you're ready to go deeper, head over to Corero Resource Center and for expert-driven content, real-world mitigation strategy, and the latest threats intelligence to help you stay ahead of the curve. As the threats landscape continue to evolve, so must our defenses, stay informed, stay resilient, and most importantly, stay secure. Until next time.